Hello, Jeffrey Martin here, Director of the Center for the Study of Non-Symbolic Consciousness and a research professor and Director of the Transformative Technology Lab at Sophia University in Silicon Valley, where we research how seekers can become finders and finders can become explorers so that you can live your most powerful and purposeful life. The most common question that I get is, how can I transition as soon as humanly possible, as safely as humanly possible, to non-duality, or to enlightenment, or to persistent mystical experience, or to transcendental consciousness, or pick your term. We've got hundreds of these terms cataloged at this point from around the world. People ask me this because they know that I've studied this for over 10 years with thousands of people who claim to experience this, and that we've been doing experiments for the last few years that shifted people in as little as a week and as long as 15 weeks. We literally shifted 73% of people in our experiments into an ongoing form of this, and shifted another 26% of people into a temporary form of this that certainly seemed in many cases like it was headed in the direction of persistence. So obviously I get this question a lot. People are like, hey, what's the secret? You know, what is it that you actually do? Well, the main secret is that you have to find the method that works for you. That's really it. That's really what you're looking for. Now you may say to yourself, oh, come on, that's not a secret. I mean, but how do I do that? We have a 15-week protocol that's designed to help people do that, and it's a pretty complicated cocktail. I think if you're going through it, it looks pretty simple, but it's a really complicated cocktail and a really complicated design on the back end in order to take people in on the front end of our experiment and systematically work them through to spit them out with that degree of success. So I can't give you a simple answer to this, but I can tell you that it's got a simple answer overall. And that is that you've got to find the method that works for you. And guess what? When you find the method that works for you, you make quick progress. So if someone says to you, oh, you know what? If you would just use this meditation method, you will have a transition. And you just go and you sit and you try the meditation method, and you give it a week of your time or something. You go back to them and you say, I don't really feel anything. Nothing really seems to be happening or whatever. And they say to you, just keep at it. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes decades, but believe me, this is the one. There's nothing that works quite like this. And so you go back and you try another week of it, and come back to them again. You say, it just didn't really seem to do it for me. And they say, well, it's just you just got to keep at it for as long as it takes. Yeah. So our data says don't do that. Our data says that's a really good way to waste years or decades of your life. What you should be doing instead is finding the method that works for you. So if you've given your all for a week to a method, and what do I mean by giving your all? Giving your all basically means a couple of different things. First, trying it for a week. We think that a week is plenty of time in order to determine whether or not you're really in sync with a method or not. And second, doing it for an hour a day. Now you may be saying to yourself, oh gosh, I can't possibly do that for an hour a day. Are you kidding me? There's no way I can do that for an hour a day. All right, fine. So maybe do it for a half an hour a day for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. I mean, you're just really sort of looking to get to a certain time, but you don't want to do it in like 5-minute chunks for a couple of months or something here and there. You really do need solid chunks of time. So, you can do it in 20-minute chunks a couple of times a day for a couple of weeks if you want, or you can do it for 30 minutes a couple of days a week in a single chunk. Or the real key that we find is if you can just get to the hour mark, really what you're doing is you're getting past about the 40 to 45-minute mark. And there's just something that happens around that time. You'll notice it because as you're coming up on that 40-minute mark, no matter how awesome it's been up to that point, suddenly you'll start to get kind of antsy. And little thoughts will pop in like, geez, I've been doing this for long enough. I should get up and I should do other stuff. There's just something that tries to derail you right around that point. That's a pretty good sign that you've got a method that has the potential to really work for you, because a method that you're in sync with right around that 40 to 45 minute point, your normal mind, your active mind is going to be like, okay, we've done this enough, let's go on. Because if you can get past that threshold, there's a tremendous amount of progress that you can make on the other side of it, even if you only do 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes or 15 more minutes. So that's a pretty good indication of it. So that's why I say an hour a day for a week. The end of that, you'll know whether or not you're in sync with a method or not. Now, I think it's also important to note that not all methods are created equal. So I think when you go out to the internet and you search on meditation and stuff like that, it's pretty common to see people saying, oh, this was the one that did it for me, and you get confused, you get overwhelmed. There's like all of these things out there, and lots of people are saying that it works for them. So first of all, that's great that people are finding what works for them, so fantastic there. But for you, it can be a little bit confusing, like where do you start and what do you do? Well, here's my advice to you. The good stuff has basically risen to the top over time. So you can't really go wrong by starting with a meditation that's been vetted by some religious or spiritual tradition for a really long time. Now, for those of you that are atheist or agnostic and you're just dead set against anything religious or spiritual, fine. I mean, ignore the dogma. Don't do anything with the religious or spiritual beliefs or what they want you to believe about the meditation or whatever. Just take the practice and try the practice. And try it for an hour a day. And try it for a week, if you can get yourself to do an hour a day, or take my other suggestions if you need to back it down from there. But these gold standard methods have really risen to the top over time. I mean, hundreds of years haven't been poured into methods that don't work, but hundreds of years have been poured into methods that work well, but don't work for everybody. In our research, we didn't find a method that even worked for a majority of people. Now, what do I mean when I say work? I'm talking specifically about helping you to transition to what we call persistent non-symbolic experience, which is really the core, the psychological core experience around things like non-duality and enlightenment and stuff like that. So those are religious terms, and they've often got a lot of dogma and beliefs around them and things that people want to stick onto them that don't necessarily belong there. Our psychological core of this experience, which is an absolutely incredible experience, we call it persistent non-symbolic experience. So I'm talking about things in that direction. I'm not saying you can't meditate for a minute or 30 seconds or 15 seconds and get a lot of relaxation, because absolutely you can do that. Now, this isn't about relaxation. This isn't about focus. I'm talking specifically about a transition, about things that move you in the direction of ongoing and persistent forms of non-symbolic experience. All right? So try, if you don't know where to start, if you don't have any idea where to begin, I say go with the greatest hits. Go with the stuff that's risen to the top over time. Just try one. If it works for you, after a week, if you're like, oh, I know I'm on the right track, fantastic, keep doing it. If not, set it aside. One other thing that's very important for you to know is that probably the technique that works for you isn't going to work forever. The reason for that is really simple if you think about it. It's producing growth, right? If you've got the right method, it's changing you. You're experiencing some growth around that. So guess what? At some point, you're going to come out of sync with that method. Now, here's what happens. People latch on to that method, often because they've been looking for one that works for a while, and they just put this death grip on this method, and they just don't want to let it go. You got to let it go. You got to release your grip. You got to say, okay, thank you for all of the progress that you were able to help me make. I'm going to go find the next method now that helps me to advance. So make sure that you're paying attention to whether or not your method continues to work for you. Listen, if you go through a dry spell for a day or a couple of days or whatever, push through it, right? Give yourself a couple of weeks before you're sure that a method has stopped working for you. But if after a couple of weeks it doesn't really seem to have its old magic anymore, then my suggestion is set it aside and see if you can find the next method that works really well for you. All right, so finally, the last thing that I want to tell you is you can do this. All of our research around persistent non-symbolic experience suggests that it's a really, really accessible thing. And because we're living in times where you have all these different methods and stuff available to you, you can absolutely find the thing that works for you, and you can get there quickly. And when I say quickly, I mean I know lots of people who got there in a week, right? So I'm not talking about decades. I'm not even talking about years. In our Finder's Course experiments, we had 73% of people transition in less than 15 weeks, from the first week to the 15th week, at different points in time. About half of them in the first part, about a third to about 25 to 30% of them or so in the first half of that program. About 50% a few weeks later, just as an example. And then, we picked up the rest of the 73%. In the remaining weeks. And so this is something that happens at different things. It happens at different points in time for people. But it should be able to happen for you very, very quickly, very, very safely these days. And it's because we're living in incredible times. And I just really want to encourage you to not give up. I want to really encourage you to just give it a try, to give it your best shot. You are an incredible person because you're actually pursuing this. You're watching this video. There's very few people in the world who know about this. There's very few people in the world who are pursuing it, even among those who know about it. You are an extraordinary individual, and you can absolutely reach it. Everything about our research says you can get there. So you've just got to keep at it, and you've just got to keep trying.